Welcome to the channel. If you love stories that stir the heart and leave a lasting message, you're in the right place. We'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories reach. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss what's coming next. Tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss, full of emotion, unexpected twists, and a reminder of the good still left in the world. Thanks for being part of this storytelling journey. A boy interrupted the judge for Waffles and changed his mom's life. Forever Amber Thompson woke before the sun had even thought of rising. The dim glow of the early morning barely reached through the blinds of her small apartment in Queens, New York. It was quiet, too quiet, but she cherished that stillness. For a few brief minutes, before the chaos of the day would begin, it felt like the world paused just for her. In the next room, her 7-year-old son Ethan was still sound asleep, curled up beneath a faded superhero blanket, his favorite stuffed bear nestled against his chest. Amber watched him for a moment, her heart heavy with love and worry. Being a single mom wasn't easy, especially in a city that moved faster than she could keep up with. That morning should have started like any other. She would pack Ethan's school lunch, throw on her apron, and head out to the small diner where she worked long hours for barely enough. But today was different. Today, instead of serving coffee and eggs to early risers, she had to stand before a judge. The charge: a $200 parking violation. 2 weeks earlier, Amber had parked her old minivan, just for a few minutes, in a spot reserved for handicapped drivers. She wasn't trying to break the law. She wasn't being reckless. She was desperate. Ethan had been burning with fever, his cheeks flushed, his body trembling. The pharmacy was only steps away, and she needed to pick up his prescription before the doors closed. In that moment, the urgency to get help for her son outweighed the thought of scanning the block for legal parking. So she parked, rushed in, and came back out within 5 minutes. But the ticket had already been there, cold, yellow, and merciless, flapping under her windshield wiper. Now, as she quietly zipped up Ethan's jacket and slipped on her coat, that moment replayed in her mind like a storm she couldn't escape. "Come on, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice shaking. "We have to go." The courthouse loomed large and gray as they approached it, its towering columns and stone walls casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Amber held Ethan's hand tightly as they entered, his small fingers barely wrapped around hers. The security guards didn't smile. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The courtroom was cold. They took their seat near the back. Judge William Harris would be presiding, a man known for his strict rulings and zero tolerance for excuses. Amber knew the odds weren't in her favor. She wasn't a lawyer. She didn't have anyone to speak on her behalf. All she had was her truth. She closed her eyes and silently rehearsed what she would say, that she was a hard-working mother, that it was a mistake made under pressure, that she meant no harm. And all the while, Ethan sat quietly beside her, clutching his bear and blinking up at the high ceiling above, completely unaware that today, his small voice would change everything. The courtroom was silent, eerily so. Amber sat rigidly on the edge of her seat, heart thumping like a war drum in her chest. Beside her, Ethan kicked his legs quietly, humming to himself as he clutched his stuffed bear. The clerk called her name, Case 117, Amber Thompson, and her stomach twisted into a knot. She rose slowly, squeezing Ethan's hand. Together they walked toward the front of the room, their footsteps echoing off the marble floors like distant thunder. Judge William Harris, a man whose reputation alone could make grown men squirm, peered down at them from his towering bench. His face was unreadable, carved from stone, eyes sharp and unflinching. Amber barely had time to speak before Judge Harris's voice boomed across the courtroom. "Miss Thompson," he said, flipping through a folder. "You're here today regarding a citation for parking in a space reserved for the handicapped. Do you deny the violation?" "No, Your Honor," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But and then it happened." Before she could explain, before she could plead her case, a small voice cut through the silence like a lightning bolt on a clear day. Can we get Waffles now? Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Heads turned. Amber's face flushed crimson. Ethan, standing at her side, blinked up at the judge with the unfiltered honesty only a child could deliver. "I'm hungry," he added, matter of fact, patting his stomach. The moment was surreal. The courtroom, which seconds before had been a chamber of law and order, transformed into a stage of stunned disbelief. A few people chuckled under their breath. One woman stifled a laugh with her hand. A man in the back cleared his throat, trying to disguise a grin. Amber felt like the floor had opened beneath her. "Ethan," she hissed, bending down. "Not now, please." But it was too late. "Judge." Harris had stopped mid-sentence. His pen hovered in the air, frozen. Slowly, he looked up from the file, his steely eyes meeting the small boy's. "Did you just say, Waffles?" he asked, his voice caught somewhere between amusement and astonishment. Ethan nodded seriously. "With syrup and butter, please, for—" A long beat, the room held its not a smirk, not a twitch of the lip, a real, visible smile from the most rigid man in the courthouse. Amber couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her embarrassment melted into confusion, then disbelief. She opened her mouth to apologize, to explain, to say anything, but Judge Harris raised a hand to stop her. "Let's take a short recess," he said, standing from his chair. The entire room went still. "Recess?" The bailiff repeated. "I believe I need a moment," Judge Harris said, and just like that he disappeared through a side door, leaving behind a stunned courtroom and a single mother clutching her son's hand, completely unaware that her child's innocent hunger had just cracked open the hardest heart in the room. Amber stood frozen, still gripping Ethan's hand, as the heavy door shut behind Judge Harris. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, whispered guesses about what just happened. People leaned toward one another, eyes wide with disbelief, some chuckling softly, others shaking their heads in awe. Amber, still reeling, knelt beside Ethan. "Sweetheart," she whispered, trying to stay composed. "You can't just say things like that in court." Ethan tilted his head. "Why not?" He looked hungry too. Amber stared at him, half laughing, half panicking. "That's not how court works." But before she could say more, the side door creaked open. Judge Harris returned, slower this time, as if he had left his robe of formality behind. He approached the bench without his usual weight, his expression unreadable, but different. Lighter. As he sat, the courtroom grew silent again. All eyes turned to him. He cleared his throat, then leaned forward. "Miss Thompson," he began, but his voice wasn't stern. It was steady, measured, and surprisingly gentle. "Your son said he was hungry. Is that true?" Amber's heart sank. She nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. We didn't have time for breakfast this morning. I didn't want to be late." "And why is that?" he asked, still focused. Amber hesitated, then looked at Ethan. "Because I thought showing respect to this court mattered more than anything else." There was a pause. Then Judge Harris turned his attention to Ethan, who stared back at him without flinching. "What's your name, young man?" "Ethan," he replied proudly. "But you can call me Ethan." A ripple of soft laughter echoed through the room. Even the bailiff cracked a smile. "Well, Ethan," the judge said, his voice warm, "I don't think anyone has ever asked for waffles in this courtroom before. They make people happy," Ethan replied with a shrug, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Judge Harris leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "Miss Thompson," he said slowly, "your son is quite something." Amber didn't know what to say. She felt the heat in her cheeks, the rush of emotion in her chest. "He's everything," she whispered. The judge nodded, then looked down at his notes before setting them aside entirely. "I want to hear more," he said, surprising everyone. "Tell me about your work, what you do, how you got here today." Amber blinked. Was this really happening? She straightened her shoulders. "I work 2 jobs, a diner in the morning and sometimes a bakery at night. I had to leave my second job early last week when Ethan got sick. I couldn't afford a sitter or time off, so when I saw a spot open at the pharmacy, I just took the risk." She looked down. It was 5 minutes, Your Honor. I didn't mean to break the law. I just, couldn't afford to lose him. The courtroom was still. No one moved. Even the air felt heavy. Judge Harris didn't speak right away. But something had clearly shifted. In his eyes, in the room, in the story they were all now a part of, because this wasn't just about a ticket anymore. It was about understanding the few. Room was silent. So silent Amber could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Judge Harris sat motionless for a moment, his hands folded on the bench, eyes fixed on her. Then he slowly reached for a folder beside him, not the one with the case file, but another, slightly worn, with a red paperclip holding the pages together. Miss Thompson, he began, his voice steady but no longer cold. Your honesty speaks louder than any legal argument could. And your son, well, his timing may be unconventional, but his message couldn't have been clearer. Amber didn't breathe. She clutched Ethan's hand so tightly now that he looked up at her with a curious glance. Judge Harris continued, You're not just here over a parking ticket. You're here because life backed you into a corner, and you did what mothers do. You protected your child. He paused, then added softly, And I think you've paid enough. Amber's eyes widened, unable to process what she was hearing. Given your clean record and the context you've shared, the judge said, I'm dismissing the $200 citation in full. A soft gasp swept through the courtroom, followed. Amber's lips parted, but no words came. She could barely comprehend the weight that had just been lifted. Just hours earlier, she had imagined this day ending in tears, and now it was ending in something else entirely. Relief, maybe even hope. Thank you, Your Honor, she finally whispered, her voice catching. But the judge wasn't done. I want to offer you something more, he said, opening the folder. This, he gestured to a printed page, is a list of community programs. Some are for single parents, some for career training, child care assistance, and even full scholarships for online education. He handed the paper to the bailiff, who walked it over to Amber. Her hands trembled as she took it. The words on the page blurred behind a veil of tears. I've seen too many people fall through the cracks, Judge Harris said. Too many mothers like you, forced to choose between survival and the law. That's not justice. Amber tried to respond, but emotion closed her throat. And Ethan, the judge said, smiling now as he looked at the boy. Thank you for reminding all of us what really matters. The courtroom, once a place of fear and judgment, now felt like sacred ground. People clapped softly. Some even stood. A few wiped tears from their eyes. Amber looked at Ethan, who grinned up at her, and whispered, I told you Waffles fix everything. She laughed through her tears, pulling him into her arms. As the gavel fell and the judge dismissed the case, the applause swelled. Not for a verdict, but for a moment of humanity. A mother had been seen, a child had been heard, and a judge had chosen compassion over punishment. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was a second chance. The courtroom slowly emptied, but Amber Thompson remained in her seat, staring at the paper in her hands. It wasn't just a list, it was a lifeline. Scholarships, free child care, career training, things she had never imagined would be within reach. For the first time in years, the weight on her shoulders began to ease, if only a little. Ethan tugged at her sleeve. Mommy, he whispered, eyes wide with hope. Does this mean we can get Waffles now? Amber laughed softly, wiping a tear from her cheek. Yeah, baby, she said, her voice warm and shaking. Let's go get Waffles. As they walked out of the courthouse into the cool morning air, she looked back one last time. The building no longer seemed so cold, so towering. In that moment, it wasn't a courthouse, it was the place her life had changed. Word of what happened inside spread quickly. By the next day, a local news outlet had picked up the story, then a regional station, then a viral video clip. The image of Ethan, small, brave, and hungry, asking for Waffles in front of a hardened judge, struck a nerve with people across the country. The comments poured in, stories of single parents, strangers offering support, and countless people simply saying, This restored my faith in humanity. Judge William Harris was no stranger to media attention, but this time, it wasn't criticism for being too strict or out of touch. It was praise, compassionate, fair, human. He didn't seek the spotlight, but when asked for comment, he gave a simple statement. Sometimes justice means listening, not just to the law, but to the people living under it. Meanwhile, Amber got to work. She applied to the online degree program listed on the judge's handout. She enrolled the next week, taking night classes in business administration, studying at the kitchen table while Ethan slept in the next room. Her days were still long, her budget still tight, but the difference now was hope. Real, tangible hope. 3 months later, a photographer from a local magazine came to do a feature on her story. They found Amber at home, seated at her small table with textbooks open, and Ethan next to her, coloring in a workbook. A plate of golden waffles sat between them, syrup dripping down the sides, butter melting slowly in the center. "Do you think the judge likes waffles too?" Ethan asked with a giggle, swinging his legs beneath the chair. Amber smiled, her eyes reflecting a light that hadn't been there before. "I think he does," she said. "I really think he does." The photographer snapped the shot. It would go on to be printed beneath the headline, "The Waffle That Changed Everything." But for Amber, it was never just about breakfast. It was about being seen, being helped, being given a chance when the world had only shown her closed doors. And it all started with one hungry little voice in the quietest room in the city. What would you have done if you were in Judge Harris's shoes? Would you have made the same choice or something different? We'd love to hear your thoughts. This story wasn't just about a parking ticket or a courtroom. It was about something much deeper: compassion, second chances, and how the smallest voices can spark the biggest changes. Take a moment and share your perspective in the comments below. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's kindness changed everything for you? Or maybe you've been the one who made a difference in someone else's life. And while you're here, don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. We have an amazing community from all over the world, and it's always incredible to see how far these stories travel. Your voice matters. Your comment might be the one that inspires someone else today. If this story moved you, please like the video, hit subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another real emotional moment like this one. Tomorrow's story is just as powerful, and we can't wait to share it with you. Thank you for being here. You're part of something